Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there and welcome back. It is your friend Cesar Espino. Thank you for being here. Another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Today I have a special guest. Her name is Jackie Simmons. Hey Jackie, how are you?
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. I'm glad to have you here today. I'm definitely excited to have this conversation with you. Before we get started though, I want to just give our listeners and viewers a little bit of your background and they can get to know you and then we can dive into it. So, Jackie, she is an advocate training, and she actually has she's an author, speaker, founder of the Make It a Great Day movement and the Teen Suicide Prevention Society. And she has there's a lot of great things that we're going to be covering, from even her own daughter attempting to take her life and now doing the things that she's doing now, right? Mm-hmm. So, Jackie, tell me, before we get into all of that and the now moment, I want to know more about you, where you came from, where were you born? Let's talk about your childhood for a second.
Most people, when you ask them, where'd you grow up?
Yep.
They give you a geographic location, a city, a state, a country, a region. I grew up in the back seat of a car. I'm an Army brat. We crossed the United States by car multiple times before I started school. And then, and this does not make me normal, okay? But I started to become normal after kindergarten. My kindergarten was on 2 continents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, so talk about new kid in class. And then my parents split up and I became the child of a single mom back in a time when small southern towns in North Carolina, single moms were not the norm, to say the least.
Yeah.
So I grew up being different, being an outcast, feeling that way, feeling like I was never going to fit in. Because whether it was my dad moving with the military or my mom moving as she finished her education. Now, there are women and then there are strong women. My mama put herself back into college, finished her bachelor's and then her master's as a single mom, raising 4 of us. I'm the youngest of 4.
Yeah.
So my mother was a formidable woman. At the time, I did not appreciate that very much because I was a normal, headstrong kid.
Yeah.
So that's my background. Now, anybody who studies sociology is not going to be surprised that you fast forward a couple of decades, who was I in the story? A single mom with 3 daughters, doing what I needed to do to keep a roof over their heads. That's how I became an entrepreneur. As a salesperson, I got to the end of the month and I could pay my daycare provider or I could pay my rent. I couldn't pay both. So I had to figure out a home-based business so I could stay home and keep a home. And that's how I ended up being an entrepreneur. I knew nothing about networking, nothing about referrals, nothing about nothing when it came to business. But I knew I had 3 kids to feed and rent to pay. So you start to figure things out when you have to. And that's why when you said, would I come on a show called You Can Overcome Anything? The answer is, oh yeah. Because that's my story, is whatever challenge showed up, I found out that I could overcome it. And now I found that I can prove to everybody you are completely creative, capable, and resourceful of managing your own life. How do I know? You're here. Nobody else did this for you. You got here under your own power. You are here because of the choices you've made. And now you're in a position that you can make changes. If you were not creative, capable, and resourceful, I got news. You wouldn't be here.
I love that message. That's very, very deep. I definitely see that, and you make perfect sense. Now, you would say, and going back to what you just mentioned, right? You know, you growing up the way you grew up, and then becoming, you know, the woman that you are. A lot of times, we as human beings, right? We are more responsive between the ages 0 and 7. So if you were going through a lot of changes when you were from 0 to 7. Then people don't realize that yet those are the years that are more critical, and then you end up growing up, or you end up picking up some of those habits, or you end up doing certain of those things, right? And unless you work on fixing those things, that's going to carry with you throughout your life, right?
Yeah, you okay, so you want to geek out on the neuroscience of this, or
Sure.
do you want the short version? Because you are in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, let's get the short version of that.
All right. Between the ages of 0 and 6, that's when we make all the decisions we need to make about who we are. Between the ages of 6 and 12, that's when we make all the decisions we need to make about how the world works. Between the ages of 13 and 19, this is when we make all those decisions about who we are in the world. You want to know how much money you're making? You made that decision between the ages of 13 and 19. You decided who you were in the world. Now, it was not a conscious decision. The decisions you made before 12, by the way, all those decisions you made before 12, how the world works and who you are as a human, are made before you have a prefrontal cortex, before you have the part of the brain that can reason. That part of the brain is an aftermarket part. We try to run our lives and change our lives using an aftermarket part on the brain. Your brain was not born with that piece. So you're making decisions from pure emotion growing up. And it's from that place of pure emotion that we actually run our lives. And it's only when you start developing something that I came into very late in my game of personal development, which is emotional intelligence versus just trying to run with my IQ. That's when things started to change for me. Body, mind, and spirit I had. You know, I had been in, trust me, I spent a lot of time in Western medicine, especially being a consumer on the mental health side, both with my daughter and her multiple suicide attempts, and with my own ongoing struggle with clinical depression. So I knew the Western medicine side. They did not have a cure for me there. So I studied Eastern. So I went from body to spirit, and I studied Eastern healing arts. And after 5 years and a significant financial investment, I came out with certifications, but no cure, because they don't talk about it, even though they've been around for thousands of years. So I studied the mind, neurolinguistic programming, because I knew it was being used on me. You know, the marketing industry uses it a lot. And I'm a mediator. I studied mediation. I became a mediator. I don't do court-ordered mediation. The only conversation I care about mediating, Cesar, is the one that goes on behind your eyes and between your ears. This is the conversation that truly matters. And none of that got me stable. But I was stable only as long as I was holding still. The minute I tried a new relationship, a new career, a new part of my business, it was like riding a three-legged elephant. It was a herky-jerky ride, and I didn't know why. And the reason is because we made those decisions solely on our emotional triggers when we were really young. When I studied emotional intelligence, when I became a member of the Society of Emotional Intelligence, now my whole family are becoming tutors in a training for EQ that leads to higher IQ in kids. You know, so we're all involved in neurogamification, bringing the emotional into the brainwaves, because this is the conversation that matters. We have Zero control over the decisions we make before we have a prefrontal cortex. Whatever emotions are triggered, whatever happened that was too intense, too confusing, too painful, too fast to stay emotionally present for as a child, formed the decisions that will dictate your life until you understand that you can change your emotional patterns and change your decision-making patterns. And that's the area I love to work in now.
No.
Life is so much more fun when you can push your own buttons, pull your own strings. Yeah, when you have absolute emotional control and resilience, life is nothing but fun. There is no such thing as fear anymore because it's all just fun.
Yeah, I love that. And so how would people, because they're probably going to be thinking, right? Maybe some of the people that are listening to us or watching us, they're going to be thinking, well, how can I change the decisions that I really didn't have any control over, growing up? How can I change that now, knowing this new information? How can I turn that around? Yeah.
Did you ever date someone and then decide you didn't want to date them anymore?
Yeah.
And then start dating someone else?
Yep.
Did you ever work somewhere and then decide you don't want to work there anymore? And then decide to work somewhere else, or maybe start your own podcast?
Yeah.
Do you think I can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you know how to make a decision?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So that's all that it takes. But most people don't know that. They don't know that your beliefs are nothing more than decisions you made at a time you don't even remember. The reason I started the advocacy training program and came out of teaching people sales, I was teaching sales from the inside out anyway. You have to sell yourself on yourself before anybody's going to want to buy from you. Now I'm helping with the conversations that truly matter, the ones you're having with yourself, the ones you're avoiding with other people. Avoiding the conversation with my daughter about what could cause her so much pain that she thought ending her life was better than living her life. Avoiding that conversation almost cost me my daughter. I didn't know it's the conversations we avoid that truly matter, Cesar. So that's the whole point in what I do now. If you need to have a conversation with yourself, you need to take yourself to what I call the mindset woodshed, get an attitude correction, start heading in a new direction. By the way, that's a great Jim Croce song. Yeah. If you need to have a little walk with yourself, have a little talk with yourself, I can help people go to the mindset woodshed. We can correct this belief that says I cannot control what I believe. It's just a belief. It's just a decision you made at a time you don't even remember. And I can prove you know how to make a decision.
Yeah. No, I love that. So let's talk about your daughter for 1 second. Because I think that a lot of times, I think as people may not even see the signs, or may not even, like you said, we're trying to avoid the conversation, or we're trying to maybe look away.
I'm going to tell you that the Center for Disease Control has done a disservice to every person in this country, in my humble opinion, in that they published a list of the signs that someone is at risk. And nobody knows that list exists until after someone has attempted. And then they're looking for this resource. The other problem with this list is that if you have someone in your life who's tried or died and you go look at that list, you're going to find 18 different ways to shame yourself. You're going to find 18 different ways to say, I should have. And you're going to take yourself to Shouldville. And Shouldville is a dark, dank, flippin' town where lives get lived and dreams go to die. And I spend my life getting people out of that town. So do not do what the Center for Disease Control says. It doesn't work. Here's what you do. You ask yourself, do I or does someone in my family have a disability or something about me that makes me a little different? Somebody in my family has something that makes them a little different. You're at risk. Do I or someone in my family have a chronic illness, or am I dealing with chronic pain? You're at risk. Do I or someone in my family struggle with ongoing financial issues? You're at risk. Do I or someone in my family struggle with an addiction of any kind? And I do mean any kind, not just drugs, alcohol, work, sex, the big four. I'm also talking about gambling, screen time, and even an addiction to being right. They're all addictions. They're all at risk. And if you or your family, someone in your family has been or is being bullied, or has ever been or is being abused, you're at risk. You can see the problem. We're all at risk. Oh, and the big one. This one's on the Center for Disease Control. None of those others are, by the way. This is what I've discovered in my 30 years in this industry. Here's what the Center for Disease Control discovered. You are at risk. You're in a higher risk category of suicide attempt if you know someone who's taken their own lives. And Cesar, thanks to media, we all know someone. We all know a celebrity chef, a talented singer, or a gifted comedian who took their own life. Celebrities have done a disservice by thinking that they can take their own life. What they're doing is giving tacit permission. That's what happens. That's why one person in a community takes their own life, and all of a sudden, there's a bunch of people who are taking their own lives because it gives the people around you permission. That's why we need for you to stay. If you take your own life, you're giving tacit permission for everyone who knows and loves you to do the same. So when I walk people through the 6-step conversation that you can have with anyone, they don't have to be known risk. By the way, what we're seeing more and more, Cesar, is that the first sign that someone's in trouble is an attempt. And they don't all survive. I got really lucky.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the conversation that matters. If you just accept that we are all at risk, I call it the suicide war. Why do I call it a war? Because according to the World Health Organization, 800,000 people took their own lives in the world last year alone. That's 1 every 40 seconds. And for every adult who died, they are guessing that at least 20 others attempt. Now you're talking 1 every 2 seconds. It is a worldwide epidemic. I am determined to get ahead of this curve. It's not about identifying whether or not someone's at risk. It's accepting that we're all at risk. Let's just start having conversations that matter. Don't wait. Just learn how to have a conversation that matters.
Yeah. And with that, what are some of your tips or ideas as to how people can have those conversations? Because they could be a little bit uncomfortable, or they may not even know what to say, or again, even so, talk about it and kind of ignore it.
You want the easiest method ever?
Yeah.
It's 6 steps, okay? The first step is the most difficult one, granted. Why? Because the first step to having a conversation that matters requires that you become willing to do something that our society frowns on. So I recognize that we're in trouble here already. This is going to be the hard one. You get this one, everything else after this is easier, I promise. Cesar, you got to be willing to stop being busy. If you're willing to stop being busy, then you can have a conversation that matters. And then all you got to do is be willing to listen to whatever they want to talk about. You just break the ice. You ask a question. What's new? What's up? Or my favorite, what's the best thing that's happened to you today? That's step number 2. Just start. Be willing to listen to whatever they want to talk about. And then step 3, you introduce the topic and you make it very personal. If I'm talking to someone who is of a certain age, I'm going to address that. And I'm just going to ask, have you heard about the rising rates of senior suicide? Have you heard about the rising rates of teen suicide, of suicide among teenagers? And then you just listen. It does not matter what their answer is. It matters that you listen without reacting, without judging, without strategizing, without problem solving, without fixing. Just flip and listen. And then you ask step 4, you ask the next question. You ask if they have a friend story. Do you know someone who's tried or died. And take a deep breath, people. If you're talking to a teenager, you're running an 80% chance they're going to say yes, that they've had a friend who's tried or died and they've never told you. Why? Because when I went to a local high school and talked about the Make It a Great Day movement and the book that we had just published and what we were looking to do in the world and my story, and I asked them in the room, I said, okay, do you have a story? Do you have a friend who's tried or died? I thought maybe 50%. One by one, they told their stories. One young lady said she lost her first friend. Hear me. She lost her first friend to suicide in elementary school and her second one last year. It wasn't most of the kids in the room, Cesar. It was 100% of
wow.
Every single student in that room had a friend story. So you all need to be able to take a deep breath and just listen without judging, without fixing, without reacting. Just hold a safe space for them to express whatever it is. And if they don't have a friend story, don't worry. It's okay. You still go to step 5 no matter what. Step 5. Take a deep breath. Hold your breath if you need to in order to hold your tongue. Because the question is, do you have a story? Have you ever thought of leaving that way? It is a neutral question. The wording is critical. You're not asking, have you thought of hurting yourself? Have you ever thought of cutting yourself? You're not asking if you've ever thought of dying. You're asking specifically, have you ever thought of leaving that way? Doesn't matter what they answer. Answer could be yes or no. Doesn't matter. Just make note of it. And then ask the next question. Step 6, ask. Very neutral question again. Do you have reasons for staying? What are your reasons for staying? And just ask, just listen. Now, I've had people tell me at step 5, they had to bite their tongue because that was the only way they could hold their tongue when their child starts talking about, they've thought about it. It's about a 60-40. 60% of the people have suicidal thoughts at some point. Just this flashing thought of, I can't take it anymore. By the way, that's a suicidal thought. It's designed to trigger your brain into creativity unless you get stuck in it. And I explain all of the neuroscience behind this in the Why Not workbook because most people don't know how their brains work. We weren't given the operating manual, so I wrote one. Yeah. And so that's a free resource for everybody. The value of being able to have this conversation, find out if they have a story, if they thought of leaving that way, find out if they have reasons for staying. Now, here's what you do with this information. If the answer to number 6, do you have reasons for staying, is no. And the answer to number 5, have you ever thought of leaving this way, is yes. You don't wait. You don't hesitate. You pick up a phone. You dial in the United States 1-800-273-8255. That's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Why? Because you are dealing with an accident waiting to happen. These people are not intentionally going to go out and take their own lives, but they are in the highest risk group possible if they have not identified a reason for staying and they have admittedly had thoughts of leaving. That's immediate. Take action. You don't intervene. I don't care if you are a mental health professional, you are not qualified to deal with the people you care about. So you call this number. Why? People are more willing. Teens are just like adults. We're more willing to have these conversations with a stranger than we are with someone who might know the possible players in our pain. That's why the hotline. You want to save it in your phone under help. And it's a simple number. Every country has one. Find the one that's local for you. If you're in the US, I'm going to give it to you again. It's 1-800-273-8255. Save it in your phone. You never know whose life you're going to save. By the way, and they text. You don't even have to call anymore. They have people standing by waiting to text with you.
Wow.
Here's what we know to be true. Before COVID, before we came into this, what my friend Taryn calls the worldwide stress test, before we came into this time, what I call the COVID cocoon, 3,000 teenagers a day in the United States were attempting to take their own lives. And that's just the ones who didn't die. The number goes up if you include the ones who died. 3,000 a day. The best guess, because nobody's releasing current information, the best guess is that number is probably doubled. And nobody knows for sure, but everybody has a story.
Yeah.
Almost everybody I know has a story. They know someone who's tried or died.
Yeah.
And so that's why this is such an important conversation. Yes, you can overcome anything. Yes, you can actually prevent people from taking their own lives. All you have to do is be willing to start a conversation that truly matters.
Yeah.
There's nothing here to be afraid of except silence. Suicide is the leading cause of violent death in the world. According to our world in data, suicide outnumbers homicide, war, terrorism, and automobile accidents combined.
Wow.
Combined. And yet we don't talk about it. And the silence is killing us.
Yeah.
So I think you can overcome anything if you're willing to talk about it. And you can't overcome nothing if you're not.
Right. And I love that. I definitely love that. The fact that, I mean, going back to just the 6 steps, I mean, like when you think about it, is nothing, you know, like that saying is no rocket science. Like the steps
I was teaching these same 6 steps in a different variation for a sales conversation. You want to have a good sales conversation and a one-on-one conversation, you follow these steps. All you do is when you introduce the problem that you are most uniquely qualified to solve, you just ask them, you know, have they heard about the rise in obesity if your thing is weight loss? Have they heard about the rise in small business failure if your special sauce, your genius is business turnaround? Have they heard about the problem? Do they know someone who's struggling with the problem? Do they have a story? Have they ever struggled with the problem? What then? Do they have reasons for staying? You just turn that into what would your business, what would your life be like without the problem? All of a sudden, if you are the bridge from the problem to what they want, what their life would be like without the problem, and what it would cost them to keep the problem is the only question that's not in there. Yeah. And I could have put it in there. I could have had the question of, if you don't turn this around, what do you think is going to happen? And the person you're talking to is probably going to look at you and say, I'm going to die. But I realized I didn't have to go that step in the conversations that matter, though we certainly could. If they're resistant to calling the 800 number, then you go to the 7th step and you ask, what do you think your life's going to be like in 3 months if you don't change the way you're thinking?
Right.
Go ahead. If they're resistant to calling the 800 number, you go to the 7th step. I just revised my whole training program. Thank you very much. Now I got to go rewrite my manual. All right. But yeah, no, the 7th step is important if you need it.
Right.
Most of the time you don't, but you might. And in sales, you do. In sales, you have to take people to what's the cost of keeping the problem. Why do you want to know that? Well, because if it's a $5 problem, they're probably not going to invest in my $50 solution. Yeah, makes sense. I'm not the right person.
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. And with you going through this personally yourself, right?
Yeah. Oh, I had these steps when my daughter was a teenager. My daughter is now 38. We just had this conversation right before I announced the first advocate training program, because if I couldn't follow these 6 steps with my own daughter, if I couldn't become willing to stop being busy long enough, then I didn't feel like I could help other people do that.
Right.
It's worth doing, people.
Yeah. And that was the one thing that I was going to say, like, perhaps what is the aftermath once you go through this 6 or 7 steps, and you get the adequate help? Are there any things that you have to do, just like the mind, how you got to continue to like reinforce, like talk about being positive, right? Or motivation. You got to continue to do some of that stuff. What do you do here after that, after going through that cycle?
Well, I absolutely agree with you. Okay. If you want to change something, then you need to change something.
Yeah.
Okay. If you want something to change, you got to change something. So here's what I recommend. I recommend that people come into the Advocate Training Program, which is 6 weeks. Why? Because we start with the know, like, and trust factor. Do you know, like, and trust yourself? I don't care whether you come into the program I do, whether you start doing meditations on this, whatever tool calls to you. Positive affirmations work with the prefrontal cortex. You need to also do the work with the emotions. So I have lots of free resources for people. Okay. The neurogamification of emotional education, which is for people from the ages of 3 through the C-suite. They started with organizational C-suite people, and the parents in the room wanted this game to take home. And 3 years later, they said, okay, we surrender. We'll make it for kids. And so now they have a whole suite, and the information is free. And I'm happy to give everybody the website to go to for that. If someone thinks that they are not sure if they're suffering from anxiety, am I worried or am I anxious? Am I sad or am I depressed? If you know somebody in that kind of space, I've got a free resource. What about anonymous, free self-assessments for depression and anxiety that are monitored by mental health professionals? And the website's simple. See, I wear an elephant around my neck.
You do.
The website is emotionalelephants.com, and they can get a free self-assessment that's totally anonymous. Let's just take all of the barriers of entry away, so you can get immediate help there. So now we've got the game. Oh, that website is becominggenuine.com, because there's nothing more genuine than being able to express emotion freely. Becominggenuine.com. You'll find all the information about neurogamification and the social emotional and the card games. And there's a lot of free information there for you. Emotionalelephants.com. That's the anonymous free mental health self-assessments that can lead you into moderated group self-education. All of it's free. All of it's anonymous. So removed all the barriers to entry. Somebody wants something more active. They want to actually get trained in how to be an advocate, how to have these conversations, how to improve the know, like, and trust factor for themselves or other people. They can contact me and come into the Advocate Training Program. Again, low barrier to entry, Cesar. My 6-week courses normally run $1,000. This is less than $100. Why? My goal is to train 100,000 advocates this year. If each person positively impacts only 1,000 people, that's going to be 100 million lives. That's going to turn this tide. And that's my goal.
Yeah.
Before COVID, I was trying to get ahead of the wave. Since we came into the COVID cocoon, Cesar, I don't think we're looking at a wave anymore. I think we're looking at a flipping tsunami. And we're going to lose a generation. And I'm not going to let that happen. I started this movement because of what I lived through as a parent. And if 3,000 teens attempt to take their own lives, that means 6,000 parents start to live the nightmare that I lived every single day. I just don't think that's acceptable. So that's what started the mission. But that was before I knew that it was an epidemic that was worldwide. We don't talk about it, and the silence is killing us. And I'm out to help people start conversations that matter. That's what I'm all about. That's what everything I do is in alignment with that mission, or I don't do it anymore, Cesar. You want to know what having a purpose in your life will do for you? It will shine a bright light on everything that's non-essential. And everything that's not in alignment with my mission has fallen away. And that doesn't mean I don't love you if you're my friend and you haven't heard from me in a while. Okay? And it's not that I'm too busy. It's that I'm on purpose. Some people say I'm on fire. And if there's another way to live, if somebody said they would pay me $10 million to go back to living a life that was not on fire and not on purpose, I would say no, thank you.
Yeah.
There's something about living your life on purpose. There's something about taking the little steps that help you grow so that you're ready when your purpose taps you on your shoulder. I don't know what your purpose is. All I know is that there are things you can do that help you be ready. And one of them is to get to know, like, and trust the one person you're going to live with your entire life. You.
Yourself.
You.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you started this movement back in August 2019, Make a Difference mission, right?
The Make It a Great Day movement. Yeah, it started with this. It started with this book. My daughter was trying to write a chapter for this book. It was just going to be inspirational stories for teens. And she was stuck. She had writer's block. So she gave a 7-minute talk. She said, I'll give my talk. She was going to be in an upcoming public speaking event. She says, I'll give my talk. I'll get it transcribed. Hey, Cesar, sounded like a good idea at the time. The morning of her talk, she had asked me what to write about. And I'm like, one of your never quit stories. Don't worry. They're all good.
Yeah.
You'll rock this. Well, she rocked it all right, Cesar. She rocked me. You know, everything worked the morning of her talk. The videographer was set. The PowerPoints worked. Yes.
Yeah.
There were all these entrepreneurial women. The morning had just gone really well, that session. And then everybody was getting that nervous, excited state before you give a talk. Oh my God, I was so proud of my daughter. She volunteered to go first. I'm sure it showed, Cesar, when I introduced her, when I welcomed her to the front of the room. I was the host of the event. I had no idea what was coming. She started with that startling statistic of 3,000 a day. I had no clue. I was like, what? Then she said, when I was 14. And I'm in the back of the room going, what? Because for over 20 years, we hadn't talked about it. When the therapy and the counseling, the interventions, the medications, when we were done with that, we thought we were done with that. And we had sort of had this unspoken agreement to let the past be the past. I didn't know then how dangerous that was. I didn't know until her next sentence, which was that she still struggled with suicidal thoughts. I don't know if my heart stopped beating, but I know I stopped breathing because my brain exploded with how the hell could I have missed this? Again. I got saved. When she ended her talk, and I could breathe again, because she ended her talk with this idea of having a program to teach the coping skills that she's learned along the way to teens before they need them. And while everybody gave her a standing ovation and rushed up to congratulate her for being so vulnerable, I was in the back of the room taking 3 very deep,
yeah, I can imagine.
very slow breaths, which is, by the way, that's stress management intervention number 1 is take 3 very deep, very slow breaths. It works. Trust me, that day proved it. By the time everybody got reseated, I had a plan. I would help her. We'd take this book and turn it into a book to start the conversations around suicide. We'd get the book done. I'd help her with her program. Why? Because I create training programs in my company. This is what I do. Yeah. So I had all the pieces. I could help her. And Cesar, as good as those things are, raising awareness of the problem, creating the programs, the truth, it was just another way for me to stay busy, for me to stay too busy to have the conversation with her. It was only when I realized that I was going to launch a program that I hadn't tested. I was going to go out and teach people how to have conversations that matter.
Yeah.
When I hadn't had one. So we had a conversation. And what I learned is that people who struggle don't always know why. And that's not what matters. For anybody who's afraid that they're going to find out all of these deep, dark monster in the closet stories, I'm going to tell you that when she opened the door to that closet and put a bright light on what I had been so afraid of for over 20 years, there wasn't anything there. The why is what ended up becoming the Why Not workbook. The why that people attempt to die rather than live. The why that people do anything, Cesar, is because in that moment, it seems like the best idea at the time. That's why. Now you don't have to be afraid of asking. It's the only answer to why people do things. It's what seemed like the best idea at the time. An advocate's job is not to take that idea off the table, but to make sure that people can see other options so that that's not the only idea anymore. And that's all we do as advocates. We are not mental health anything. We are not in that realm. That's why we have all those resources for people who are known to be at risk, or we can identify that are at risk. If they're at active risk, you give them these tools, the hotline, the emotional elephants, the becoming genuine, you give them the tools. That's all an advocate does. And for everybody else, you help them get to know, like, and trust themselves. You help them identify other resources, other options. That's it. You become their advocate by being your own. You become an advocate for living for yourself. You become an advocate for staying for others. Everybody's an advocate. If you've ever smiled at a stranger, you're an advocate. Yeah. We just are believers in the power of positive, possible outcomes. So if you believe in the power of possible, positive outcomes, you're already an advocate. Just go smile more. Oh, by the way, this last week in May, every year is National Keep Smiling Week. And October, it's International Keep Smiling Week. So just become part of something positive. You never know whose life you're going to save.
Yeah. No, and I really enjoy that. And you're absolutely right in a lot of different aspects. One thing that I talk to people sometimes is that when you go to the store, when you're walking, when you're jogging, whatever you're doing, and you see another person coming by, like, sometimes the best thing you can do is smile, because you don't know what that person's thinking about. You don't know what that person is going through right now. And as you mentioned, that simple smile could have changed that person's life, or even, their next move, right? And so I definitely empower that and embody that. That's something we have to do as human beings, and it's part of what I also perceive as, when we're looking at our mission or our purpose. You were talking about it earlier today. I do believe that we have a purpose here, and I believe that we're not just here to be a body that's taking up space. We have something bigger than just that, and we have to be able to tap into that. We have to be able to understand what that might be, and go out and look for that, and just do your part in this world, as you should. So definitely appreciate that. Jackie, I mean, I definitely, you've given us so much great information. And before letting you go, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
We need you more than you know. We need you to become your own advocate. We need you to be the best, happiest, most engaged, authentic, genuine person you can become. We need you here.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. And again, definitely you've overcome so many different things in your own personal life, and I love what you're doing, and I love your mission. I love the message you're trying to definitely get across. And not only that, that message is so powerful because it is helping thousands of people throughout, specifically even right now with this COVID-19. As you mentioned, there has been those people that suffer from stress or being lonely, and the fact that we're being quarantined, that is definitely increasing the rate of something, and you're doing a good deed by making these changes in your in the life of other people. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. And I want to say thank you to all my angels. Thank you, Cesar, for inviting me on your show. Thank you for the work you're doing, helping people understand that they can overcome anything. The simple steps can lead to big changes. Mm-hmm. And the Teen Suicide Prevention Society is a not-for-profit in process. The IRS is not pushing paper right now, but it's in process. Not because I ever aspired to run a not-for-profit corporation, but because I had a pharmaceutical company reach out to me who wants to give a grant to build out these programs, and they could only give us a grant if we were a not-for-profit corporation. And I'm like, I guess I'm going to learn a new skill, So you get this when your purpose taps you on your shoulder. You don't know what you're going to need to learn, but just be advised, your life is going to get more interesting from here.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jackie, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. You're awesome. And thank you for saying that you would be willing to come on my summit as an expert. And so as we get that solidified, we'll be able to let people know that they're going to be able to hear about the world according to Cesar.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to that. So definitely want to have that conversation with you for sure. Yeah. So thank you so much. And for the rest of you guys, please do me a favor. Make sure you like, share, and comment. Please come to this episode. Leave your comments. Very powerful. Make sure that you share this. There's somebody out there that needs to listen to this message. So please make sure that you share that. You can find us in all different platforms where you can listen to your favorite podcast. And again, thanks so much, and see you at the next episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Goodbye.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.